guidance at this time, Lord. But above all, we pray that you will give peace to our families and our children as we start back to school. God, we ask for protection. And as always, Jesus, we just ask for your blessings over all of these babies. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
All right. We'll need approval of the minutes from the 6-2 and 6-16 meetings.
So moved.
I have a motion from Ms. Kelly. Second from Mr. Jordan Raper. Okay, all those in favor, raise your right hand. Okay, very good. We'll need approval of the agenda, and I've had a request to add one item to the agenda, and that is to discuss the information that we received earlier about school starting in August. I would ask that if we're going to do that, so that we give you a superintendent an opportunity to answer in depth the questions that we just asked questions and let him get back to us so that we can get all the information we need at one time. So I'll entertain a motion to that effect.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Okay, motion.
The statement I'd also like to in the agenda and take number one in new business of remanufactured engines off of the new business and put back on the consent agenda. My question, Dr. Martin and staff got the answer to my question for that.
Okay, can we do this one at a time?
Sure.
Okay. So I have a motion from Ms. Bramlett and a second from Ms. Kelly to amend the agenda as noted. And then we have a request to move the new business item concerning the remanufactured engine bid, was that it? Back over to the consent agenda. So I'll need a motion and a second for that. Ms. Krause has made the motion.
Second.
Second by Mr. Ritter. All those in favor? Right hand. Thank you. Okay, very good. Committee reports, we don't have any at the moment. Good. Don't have any recognitions. So we'll move down to the superintendent's department reports and the action plan. Dr. Michael, you want to address that?
Yes, we just put that on there. We knew you were going to ask to put it on, so we went ahead and added it. So we'll open that up for discussion.
Okay, who has questions that they'd like for Dr. Michael to get back to us on?
I'll start right quick.
Okay.
You know, Dr. Michael and his team took the bold step back in March to close the schools because of the impending pandemic, and he did that ahead of the state superintendent and DOE recommending that we close schools. We did that in advance of that, and I think that was very bold. One of my major questions about reopening schools is we know a lot more about the virus, but we don't know much more about how to get rid of it. We don't know any more about that. Why do you think, Chris, it's comparing to when we closed the schools in March, why is it safe now to reopen the schools with the spikes and the numbers of cases that we're seeing on a daily basis in Georgia and the area? You got any input on that?
Well, I don't know that it'll ever be safe if we define safety before the virus started. Just, again, we meet daily, and I meet weekly across the state. And we meet pretty much weekly with the Department of Health and folks from CDC and those other places. So right now we are, and again, you have to realize this reopening plan is not, it's where we are right now. This thing, and when we started writing this to the time we published it, we saw things changing. So day to day, we may make changes to this. So it's, I think we're trying to be as well balanced as we can. We do have, most of our kids will be in school. We know that. We know remote learning is strong for some students, but not others. No matter how good we get at it. Education is one of the most vital things that we do as a society. So balancing that against the unknowns of the virus is a tough thing. It keeps us all awake at night. I told the leadership a couple of days ago that it's time to mourn the past of what education was, but it's going to be different from here on. And we're going to have to be able to be even more flexible and move quicker. And, you know, education's not a skiff, it's a battleship, I say it all the time. It's hard to move it quickly, so we need to have a plan, the one we presented, ready to go. Now, that may change between now and then. We try to be very clear about that when we put it out. You know, we are basing this on the CDC and the Department of Health, and where they've got us with the spread at this point. They could change that tomorrow, and we could have to pivot and change things again tomorrow. So, yeah, I don't think any school system out there is going to tell you that their reopening plans are perfect right now, and that they're all encompassing right now. It's just an impossibility.
Well, I know
again, we follow the state. You know, we've had some questions about masks and those type of things, and that's been a tough topic of conversation daily, and will continue to be. We tried to strike a balance with that. We felt like we couldn't distance much at all on buses, so we did mandate them there. In the classrooms, in the hallways, we want our staff protected, but we also have to be able to teach. And we have a lot of students that can't wear masks for whatever reason. Those type of things. So what we decided to do, and what we're going to continue to do, and what we've done from day one, is we take the CDC guidance and we take the Department of Health guidance, and basically we're using that at this point. And so strongly recommended is the verbiage they're using right now. That's where we are. We may see a spike in Barrow County that we may not see other places, and we'll respond.
Well, you don't know how much I appreciate, I'm sure everybody in the room feels the same way about the amount of time and effort y'all put into this, and taking what you're given and trying to make the best of it. But I know we're estimating now that we're sort of in the level 2 moderate risk zone,
and we don't have it officially, but that's where we believe it.
But that's where we think we're going to be. Is that something that we have input on, where we are in that risk?
We really don't. That's we're following the guidance that was given to us from the Department of Ed, again, and the State Department of Health, and they're the ones that came up with the radio and green. So that's what we follow, and that's where we have our plans kind of slotted in. So the green, as we went over a while back, the green is one set, or one, wide open back. The yellow, depending on where we are in the yellow, we have 4 different plans that we can go through. One of them is one that we presented. And red will be back to, if we slip into the red, we'll be right back to where we were at the end of the school year last year.
Well, that's my question, can we have the power, the ability, if they place us in a moderate risk for spread, and we feel, some of us or all of us feel that we're at a higher risk, can we elect to move that ourselves?
Well, we always have local control.
We do, don't we? Okay.
To an extent. I mean, we all work for somebody. And again, we coordinate very closely with our surrounding counties. We try to all, especially the superintendents in our research, we talk not weekly, and we try to be on the same page with that. But yes, we do have local, an extent of local control, just like everything else.
Who determines that spread level? Is the Department of Health for each individual county, or is that something we do?
I believe it's Department of Health. Matt, see you online, but they're working on, we thought we'd have it by now, but it's a dashboard where they will take all the data and put it into the dashboard, and it's a formula for the Department of Health and the governor's office.
Any other questions?
Well, without micromanaging every little bit of this, and I don't want to do that, but have we thought about how we're going to instruct nurses to handle sick kids in their clinics? How we're going to do that? I don't see anything necessarily in the plan that tells nurses.
I see Matthew unmuting there.
Yes, sir. So that is going to be something that we're going to take extremely seriously. We've been working with our 2 lead nurses all summer to try to come up with, we're going to talk a little bit later in the meeting about how they're going to be protected We've also thought very seriously, we've worked with our schools in terms of, students come into the clinic for all kind of reasons, some of which are just routine medication they need to take, or, they need a Band-Aid or something like that. And the last thing you want is students who just need that kind of medical care exposed to students who might be ill or have COVID or something to that effect. So we've looked at the CDC guidance on how to separate out clinics. We may have isolation rooms in some buildings, depending on the size of the clinic, but we want to make sure that all students have the proper protective equipment to wear when they're in the clinic. We want to make sure that we're being thoughtful about that. We will be doing training with each of our nurses. We're coordinating with the Department of Public Health on that. We want to make sure they have what they need, because they're going to be the most critical factor in the control of the spread within the district in each school. So they're going to have to be well supported. I know John St. Clair is working on making sure their technology is up to par. So everyone recognizes that the nurses are going to be a critical component of this, and we're committed to getting that right. And we have a tremendous team of nurses, and I am quite confident they're going to be up to the challenge.
Well, I think, man, I foresee as the cold and flu season comes upon us, the number of people that might report to a nurses clinic. They have a lot of people anyway, and we need to empower them to be able to tell people, to tell students and tell parents that they have to come get their child because they're showing signs of perhaps a COVID infection. And we need to let parents know too that that's what we're going to be doing, and probably maybe an unprecedented numbers.
Yes, sir. Parents
to come and take their child home, get them tested or whatever. And I'm sure that's going to be part of that training you're talking about.
Yes, sir.
So I'll piggyback on that. I don't need an answer today. I'll just give you the question. But I just wanted to know if you could, just for clarification purposes, address the sick/return to school policy that will be used, assuming we go to school under the grounds that we are planning to right now and under that plan. So because we know that coronavirus and just regular illness kind of look the same. If a child goes home with a headache and a cough or a runny nose or things like that, how we're going to know when that child will come back to school. Like if the child is vomiting, we usually say, or has a fever, we say you have to be fever-free within 24 hours, that kind of thing. I would just like some clarification, mainly for parent purposes, so that they can plan accordingly. That if their child gets sent home, they're going to be sent home for 5 days or until they get a test or whatever. So if you could just elaborate on that, so we can clarify.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, but that's spelled out in the document.
Yeah, in the document, you'll see the guidelines, and those came directly from the Georgia Department of Public Health related to when we have students who are either have a positive COVID test, or they have an exposure to someone who has a positive COVID test, whether they're symptomatic or not. And exposure is a broad term. That could just be they passed them in a hallway, or that could mean they spent time with them. And we rely on the Department of Public Health to help us make those distinctions. But in those cases, we have pretty prescribed guidelines that are designed to make sure that they have enough time separated, whether they're symptomatic or not, so that they're not coming back before they can infect others. The gray area that comes in, that I think is what you're referring to, is, in a normal school year, students get bronchitis, they get, sinusitis, all kind of things that may have symptoms that cross over with COVID-19. And so there's the tendency to want to treat everything as if it's that. This is a gray area and it's hard. And, two of the things we're trying to make sure we do is, one, we're trying to encourage everybody, if your child is sick, to get a COVID test. Like, that's something we want to make sure that people know is available, that the state is providing and helping them to know where to do that, because that clarifies the issue quite critically, is that we can just say, well, it was a COVID negative test. That's a pretty good indication this is not COVID. And then we can use the normal kind of exclusionary guidelines we have for students that are sick. One thing we did try to do is, in the past, we have had a general guideline that when a student particularly has a fever of 100.4 or higher, that they are not allowed to return until they have been fever-free without the aid of fever-reducing medication for at least 24 hours. If you notice in the guidelines for COVID-19, it extends that to 72 hours. So in an effort to try to be maximally safe, we've actually brought those two things into alignment. So regardless of the reason. If a student has a fever of 100.4 or higher that's confirmed, they're going to have to be out for 72 hours minimum until fever free before they can come back. And that's just a way to kind of hedge our bets a little on students that may be showing COVID symptoms, but we don't know if they are COVID-19 positive. But the whole thing can be clarified much more clearly with a test, which is why we're going to encourage, we can't mandate it, but we are certainly going to encourage everybody whose child gets ill to consider having a COVID test.
And those, even those we encourage to have a test that don't get a test, we can let them back in school, even though they've not been tested, we thought they should be.
If they're fever free for 72 hours, then potentially yes. Depends on what, we don't allow students who are, struggling to breathe or who are, vomiting or, things like that. They don't typically stay at school. The question, the grayer area is going to be with kids who maybe have a hacking cough or something that could be allergies. And as unedifying as this response I'm about to give is, we're going to have to consider those on a case-by-case basis frequently, because the nurses typically know the kids, they know their health patterns and symptomology, and we're going to rely on them to be the person who kind of guides us on what the right decisions is. I think me trying to make that determination sitting in an office without a medical background, that's not something I'm going to, rely on. I'm going to rely on them to make those kind of determinations.
Let me ask a question, because I know this is kind of years and years ago, way before COVID was everything, but about pushing that envelope when it comes to the sports season and that sports thing. The students and sometimes parents do too, but I know coaches want to get that athlete that's a great athlete back out there on the basketball court, on the track, or on the football field, or on the soccer field. How are we going to make sure that they don't push that envelope that that child really is sick and may possibly have COVID or something like that, but they haven't gone to get that test?
I don't think if they have COVID, they can do it.
Well, I know, but if they haven't gone to get a test, but if they've got whatever, they may have a mild case, they may be asymptomatic.
I think that, like you said, we gotta do case by case, and if they're sick, they're not gonna feel, if they're that.
If they're that sick, they're not, but,
Yeah, they're not gonna feel like that.
I mean, I know my kids would have played to the death even if they were very lightly. My daughter had, and my son, if they're bleeding and whatever, they wanted to get back out there.
The same thing. could be
Now, as
said
a
if
parent,
you
I was
did
like,
those.
absolutely not, you're not going out there.
Real highlight for us in that is we've been moving through that. It's not perfect, but they've been pretty strict, and they've said that, they're doing random checks. If they find something like that going on, they're going to come down on the team more. And our coaches and our administrators are on board. I know what you're saying, and I've seen it happen.
Because like I said, I know my kids would have done it, and Clay and I were like, you're not going back out there, but the coaches would have put them out there if we would have let them.
I think with this one, with this COVID, with this being what it is, and they're taking it a lot more seriously. For example, parent meeting was scheduled for tonight. Head coach, football coach canceled it due to a flight safety. I've never seen that happen before.
Any other questions?
One last quick question. Chris, the deadline, enrollment deadline for distance learning is July 17th. Right. With the number of cases that we're seeing going up, there may be parents that will change their mind about it after July 17th.
Yeah, we've kind of got stuck at a catch-22 with that. We're actually, most districts that are doing it are cutting off at the 10th, and so we think to the 17th. We have to know, so because we have to put staff in place and all those things.
Sure.
There will probably be some Mondays and Tuesdays that we'll handle one-on-one. We kind of expect that, but we can't find a hard set. They can get the majority of it. We've had about, since we put it out, we've got about 400 already. We expect that, and we know, again, if there's a major shift in our status, then we're probably going to see some folks after the 17th, so then we'll work through that. It may mean that they get some delay in the instruction if we get them slotted in. And we'll already be set up for.
I've had questions about that too.
Yes, we'll already be set up with students that we'll have some transfers in. We'll have to.
And the other big thing is mask in the classroom. That's what I keep hearing about, and we're requiring masks on buses
All day.
but not in the classroom. So I know the University of Georgia just last night, I think it was.
Well, and as I've told the people I've talked to, and I've had that come up quite often, that could change tomorrow. Not to be facetious, but as we're writing, we're following the CDC and the Department of Health. That's still their wording, but we're also watching what's going on with UGA, a couple other districts. I think Gwinnett's looking at maybe making some changes. We're nowhere near the spread Gwinnett has at this point. Actually, if you look at us on the heat map, we're Barrow's kind of a lighter color than everybody around us. When that fills in, we'll probably have to make some changes. So again, you know, it could change this week.
I understand that. I appreciate it.
Okay, any other questions? As questions come up, as you think about this, just email him or pick up the phone and call him.
I don't know, I'll find out.
This is gonna be fluid, we know that, we're just gonna have to deal with it. And I just appreciate, as I know everybody else does, all the great work that's gone into this. You know, coming up with different scenarios and trying to fill in all the blanks.
I really want to give a shout out, again, I know I've done before, but to the group that we call Incident Command. We've met literally every morning. Started taking one day off during the week, but since it started. Very dedicated bunch of folks. There was our executive cabinet, Shelly Roundtree, Matt Thompson, John St. Clair, familiar faces. But, and the principals have been meeting pretty much weekly with us also. All hands on deck.
All right, we're gonna move along to support services report. Dr. Green, you're
I
up.
have nothing to add to what we discussed at the work session.
Great. Business services, Ms. Houston, you want to talk some more?
All right, our last report, did it again. Yeah, they didn't get loaded. Well, I'll tell you, we had a record month last month, again, because of the stimulus payments, so don't get excited. It's not gonna stay this way, it might, I'm Debbie Downer, I know. But we did get $1,194,922, and that was a record, all-time record for us in lost revenue, so that was good. We don't do a financial report for y'all because it's June, it's our year end, and that number is going to change because we do all these end of the year journal entries, and so we don't want you to stick with one number saying we did something and then it's all going to change in the next 2 months. And then we just have a budget timeline, and basically I went over that with y'all a little while ago. We're going to vote on a tentative budget on Monday, the 13th, and we're also going to vote through the millage rate, or not vote it through on Monday, the 13th. And we'll have public hearings for the budget and then do the final budget on the 28th.
We'll get that report loaded up for you tonight.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Perno, Systems Operations Board, anything new?
No, ma'am, nothing new to report since the work session.
All right, thank you very much. And Dr. Moden.
No new information. We're moving along with planning for teachers and students with our options that we have presented in our restart plan.
Thank you very much. Okay, don't have any clarification of previous items, old business. We're going to go to the consent agenda. The first item on that is the closeout of Yargo Elementary School renovation project. The superintendent recommends final closeout of the Yargo Elementary School renovation project. Second item is the architect for Auburn, Holzendek, and Appalachia renovations. Superintendent recommends approval of Cunningham, Foreham, Matthews, and Moore to perform design work on renovations to those schools and to that we mentioned, Auburn, Holzendek, and Appalachia. Third item on the consent agenda is Westside Middle Edition project, guaranteed maximum price. The superintendent recommends accepting a guaranteed maximum price of $8 million for the addition to Westside Middle School project. The brake shoe and drum bid brought to us by Dr. Green. The superintendent recommends approval of the low bid as highlighted in yellow for each of the specific brake shoes and brake drums in the bid tally. The fifth item on the consent agenda is the bus battery bid. Superintendent recommends approval of the low bid Peach State freight liner based on the total price. Sixth item is White Fleet service bid. Superintendent recommends approval of the low bid Connor Automotive. The seventh item is the radio service bid. The superintendent recommends approval of Alpha Communications Incorporated for the bus radio, camera, and tablet servicing. The 8th item is the instrument bid, and the superintendent recommends awarding the instrument bid to the 4 companies that sent in the lowest bid per item. We've also moved the 9th item to the remanufactured engine bid. Superintendent recommends approval of the low bid from W.W. Williams for the 3 remanufactured engines. So those are the items on the consent agenda. I'll need a motion and a second to accept those items. I heard a motion from Dr. Pope first and a second from Mr. Bailey. All right, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. Yes, all right, very good. We still have the bus tire bid. The superintendent recommends approval of the low bid based on the fiscal year 2020 purchases, respondent of Athens Commercial Tire Incorporated. So does anybody have any questions about that?
Yeah, I was just wondering when the last time we had gotten that, the bid on those.
I'm sorry, was your question, when did we last get a bid?
Yeah, that's
for
when Kim was gonna look that up, I guess. When the last time.
I don't believe, at least in the several years that I have been related to transportation, that we have brought a tire bid to the board. Excuse me. We just had our director retire, and I think that her approach was different than the new directors, and there was a little misunderstanding in terms of what needed to be brought. She bought tires as they were needed. They did get bids from vendors, and the last time that was done was in April 19th of 2019, but that was not something that was brought to the board. Because she didn't, at any one time, she didn't spend the amount that would have required that. We've had a meeting and we've got ourselves all on the same page in terms of accumulating purchases of the same item from the same vendor over the course of a year, and that's the reason we're bringing all this stuff to you at this point.
Does that clarify that?
Yes, it does.
Okay. I'll need a motion and a second to approve this.
I'm making the motion, we approve it.
Ms. Kelly made the motion. Ms. Kraus made the second. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Unanimous. Okay, great. Ms. Houston, I believe you're up again.
I'm going to give my time over to Mr. Owen, Tom Owen.
Hi, Tom, yours.
All right, thank you very much. I hope everybody can hear me. This is the refinance of the Series 2014 bonds that we discussed back at the work session. We received offers this morning for a private placement transaction. We got 6 offers. The low offer was a rate of 116. As you can see in the notes, the 2014 bonds currently have a rate of 255, which is a low rate, but in this environment, we are able to lower it a little bit. That produces gross savings of $170,716, and we always discount those back to give them to you in a present value today dollar terms, and that is 3.73% of the outstanding principal amount. We always recommend that the savings be at least 3% of the principal amount, and so we achieved that threshold. To put the $170,000 of savings into perspective, the entire remaining interest on this new bond is $182,000. So we're essentially reducing the payments, or reducing the interest payments on the old bonds by about half. But otherwise, a very straightforward refunding. School district will see just shy of a $25,000 per year reduction in their overall debt service payments as a result of the refunding. But very straightforward.
Thank you, Tom. So this, I'm sure the superintendent is recommending moving forward with the refunding. Is that correct? Okay. All right, I'll need a motion in a second. Does anybody have any questions? Second. We like those numbers.
Change your mind.
Had a motion, Mr. Bailey, and a second for Ms. Bramlett. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Unanimous. Okay, great.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate you. All right. Nurse personal protective equipment, Ms. Houston.
All right. This is something that me and Dr. Thompson are going to team together with. It's something that we haven't normally done, and I don't feel comfortable. I have to feel comfortable doing it because it's the only way we're going to be able to do it. So earlier today, I talked about that we're going to get about $100,000 worth of personal protective equipment for our nurses out of the CARES Act fund. And then there's about $30,000 that we've set aside in the general fund for personal protective equipment for our students and employees. So right now, if you go out and you try to bid this stuff, they'll have it today. They won't have it next week. By the time we get it to y'all, they'll be out of it and the price has gone up or has gone down. It's such a volatile market. So what we're asking for you to do is allow us tomorrow to purchase about $24,999 worth of personal protective equipment for our nurses, staff, students, whatever we feel that we need. And then we want to piggyback off of either a RISA group. There's some out there that have bids. Also, cooperative purchasing agency. They are, we are part of them, and they bid out all of this equipment and supplies and stuff for us. We never really go with them. We always want to do our own personal bids, but they do these bids. And they have actually beat the prices that we've already gotten on some of the thermometers and stuff that we need. So that's a good way to go. And that we'll piggyback off of those groups, either another school system, RISA, or the cooperative purchasing agency, to get supplies throughout the year. And then every time we get supplies, I'm going to report it back to you in my informational items. So I'm asking right now for you to allow us to go ahead and get $25,000 just from quotes tomorrow, so we can have it here when school opens. And then over the next few weeks, we'll get some good bids from our neighbors, our RISA groups, to purchase the rest. Now, I don't know if we should go ahead and purchase the whole we're asking for $130,000 worth of supplies, or if we should do it in quarterly installments. You know, so Dr. Thompson will probably lead us, and the nurses will lead us on when we should buy and when he feels we should run out. And some of the items that we're looking at is a no-touch thermometer for, I guess, a few for each school. The N95 masks, these are basically for our nurses. Surgical mask, the gloves, wipes, spray, hand sanitizer, face shields, safety goggles, surgical gowns, and then masks for our employees and students. Dr. Thompson, you have anything else you want to say?
No, just a couple of quick clarifications. One is that this is specific to clinic usage, which means it would be used for more than just the nurses. It would be really anyone who has to man a clinic, because some of our facilities don't have nurses, or they may have a clinic worker. This would just be for anyone of our employees who is having to deal with the sick students. And because they are going to be thrust into, you know, students who may be COVID positive, we want to make sure they have the maximally protective equipment, which is pricier when you're buying N95 masks, surgical masks. And we also want to make sure we have sufficient numbers of quality masks so that, you know, students who are, you know, in the, as I mentioned earlier, who are in the clinic for some other reason, but they have to be in there for an extended period, we want to make sure that they are protected, you know, because there may be other students in their vicinity who are ill. So we just want to make sure, because the clinic is going to be the nexus of where all of the illness in the school is going to conglomerate, we just want to make sure that we are maximally protecting. And unfortunately, that kind of equipment is not cheap. And so to do this right, we have to expend some resources.
Jennifer, if we looked into partnering with Northeast Georgia Medical Center, I mean, there might be some cost savings because they're buying in bulk. I mean, we have a good relationship with them.
We have a great relationship with them. That is something we'll do. If we haven't already, we will definitely go to them for sure.
Because they're buying the same equipment.
Mm-hmm.
There might be some savings.
You're right. Yeah. Thank you.
Does anybody have any other questions about this? All right, at this point, the superintendent recommends purchasing approximately $24,999 of personal protective equipment for the staff to start the year. And then we'll either bid these out, piggyback off other districts or RISA groups, or whoever we can get the cheapest prices from. with, for up to a total of $130,000. It could be another $105,000 if we need to over the original 25. So, and Jennifer will let us know monthly where we are with that, so we can see if we need to increase that some more or whatever. So, at this point in time, that's the superintendent's recommendation. I'll need a motion in a second. Dr. Poe? We made the motion and Mr. Bailey seconded it. Any questions? Okay, all those in favor, raise your right hand. Unanimous. Thank you. Okay. At this time, we're looking at authorization for committees to meet.
Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
I know we have suspended our clean school visit. I think we probably need to suspend that for the next foreseeable future, even when school starts back. Just to keep another group out of the schools. That's just my opinion.
Well, you know, I thought about that, and but I also thought that it might be a good idea for the committees to meet, just to go talk with the principals and give them some encouragement, see if there's anything they need to find. And if you read the guidelines, we would have to have somebody with the school system like Joe or someone there with us to do that anyway. So.
All visitors have to be masked.
It's up to the board. Do you guys want to suspend this for a couple of months?
I see Ricky's point, but I also kind of think maybe it might be a really important time for encouragement and just making sure things are being kept super clean, because that's very important during the year. But, you know, just.
Well, and the other thing too is that it would be nice if we could go talk to our nurses and see how they're doing, and if they have any suggestions. It's totally up to the board.
I think we're gonna do it. It probably needs to be volunteer.
Yes, for sure. That way whoever's comfortable feels like.
Yeah.
Not
Well,
assigning someone to have to go.
Why don't we think about that, and we can always bring that up for a vote later. And we have time.
Okay, just a suggestion.
We'll volunteer. Instead of assigning.
Yeah, we can do that. Okay. All right. At this point, we need to go into, well, I do need an authorization for committees to meet, because we may have to have some committees meet this month. So I'll need a motion. I'll need a motion for that in a second. Ms. Kelly made the motion. Ms. Kraus made the second. All those in favor? Unanimous. Okay, thank you. At this point, we'll go into executive session to discuss or deliberate upon the appointment, employment, compensation, hiring, disciplinary, dismissal, or periodic evaluation or rating of a public officer or employee, or to interview applicants for the position of superintendent. I'll need a call vote on this. Ms. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Bramlett?
Yes.
Dr. Hunt? Me, yes. Bill?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. There's Lisa. That was a yes. Okay.
She's up.
Right. All right. At this time, we'll go into executive session for personnel.
Just a moment.
Get off.